I'm going to cover all the new features of ATEasy 2021. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer. You can stop me at any time if you have any question about a certain feature. At the end, if you want to have other question about generic ATEasy things or suggestions about where we're going, or new features that you like to see, so just let me know. It's really open discussion. And uh, so ATEasy 2021, I'll just start. And can you see my screen okay? It's like because I do have a lot of a large screen. uh,
Yeah, it looks okay right now. It's only using about half the screen though.
yes. Okay, because I'm leaving the other half for ATEasy, so let's
Okay,
see how that
perfect.
works. Okay, so talking about ATEasy, so in version 2021, which is we're not we have decided starting from this version to use numbers, years, instead of the version 11 like it was supposed to be. Up to now, we've been using version 1, 2, all the way to 10, but we think it's a better solution to use the 2021 and so on. Our goal is to have a new release every year, and we have not been doing that in the last few years. And but I think part of it was the strategy that we had. It was that to wait until we have a significant number of features like you'll see in this version, and not wait for and in between release like service packs. And since so starting from this year, we're gonna do a different approach. We're gonna have every year a release, and whatever feature we have by that time, like mid-year, we will release it as is. Okay, so some of the new feature that was implemented in ATEasy 21. So the development environment, we redesigned a little bit the user interface. I can open here ATEasy. Let's see, close that one. So you can see how that looks. Um, okay, so you can see the background is black, and then I'll just pick one of my workspaces. And so you can see here on the screen a few things that were changed. First of all, we always follow the Visual Studio kind of Microsoft user interface, and this version is more close to it. You can see that the window, the documents window, are showing on the top instead of the bottom, and they have a tab. The tab is colored, um, and basically it has a flatter look, the user interface. You can change, this is the white theme, but you can change the theme. We have all kinds of themes to change the color set of the development environment. You can also, if you want to see documents side by side, you can drag that and post it like this, and it will split the screen, and you can have two panes of documents. So if you have like two instances of the same document, you can see it side by side. So for example, if I do new window, I can take that, move it here, and now I have the HTML. You can see on the left side, it shows the test, and maybe on the right side, I can see a procedure or something like that of the same document. So it's kind of more convenient than having an overlapped windows one on top of the other. And then so this is a new feature that was added. And then another thing that you can see is the when you dock, when you move like a document, like this, you see that we have those guidelines to show you where it's going to drop. So for example, if I want to split this one, this pane on the left, you can see that I can just do that. And now, so it's kind of easier to handle than the prior version where you had to drag it and it wasn't really, you wouldn't know exactly where it would paste. So this is about the new user interface, and
Hey,
I
Ronnie,
think yes,
is the properties window dockable now, or
the
is that still a
properties
floating
window
window?
is scheduled for next year to be revised, and we're gonna revamp the properties windows to have to change to a grid instead of the way it is. Look, like now, it's still this.
Okay.
But for next year, we're planning to move that, combine it um, to the grid window, which I don't know if you, um, which we have right now, but right now it's only for .NET and ActiveX controls. So all of these properties that you see are going to be visible in a grid layout, and that will allow us to kind of add more properties in much easier way than just drawing a dialog box, and every time we have a new field we have to rearrange the window. So that's coming up in the next year. um, okay.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Yes. Okay. So moving on to the next slide. So the next area of improvement, we did a lot of improvement in the code editor. And the code editor has now beautified code, which is it can work by when you type new text, or if you right click and you select beautify selection. So the way you activate it is actually by default it is active, and you can see here if I go to options, and there is a new block here called code beautify, and then it has a few options: statement, indent, smart spacing, complete statement, smart indenting, adding or removing spaces, and also correcting spaces for statements or symbols. So give you a few examples for that. So for example, if I go here and I type if, let's say, S equal ABC, and then I hit enter, you can see a few things here. One is the S is highlighted, has a red line below it. And then the second thing is that the tab, it was indented. So S is probably not defined. That's why it's like this. And then that's another feature that we have. And you can see if I go here and type here and if, it will bring it back to the beginning of the line. So this is like kind of like we automatically indent the statement with tabs. So if you have nested for or inside the if and so on, it will indent that. So for example, if I do for I equals 0 to 100, and then you can see that it jumps inside, and then maybe dA equal I or something like that. And then next, I'll hit the enter, it goes back to the position where it's supposed to do. Now, if you just by editing it, you can see it brings it back, okay? Because it knows where it's supposed to be. Um, but if I go and delete this line, for example, you can see that every line that I move down, it will fix the code and indent it. So this is, we are trying to make the code more consistent and have it and beautify it as we think it should be. There are some options there. You can turn them on or off and control, have more control over this beautify. If you want to beautify the whole document, you can actually come here and say beautify this document, and it will do that. The undo will reverse that change, of course. So you can experiment with that. You could do it on a single test or just highlighting some code and then right click and say beautify selection. And then you can see how it works just to see, to experiment with that in the beginning. So this was another feature that we had. Another feature that was done, as I showed you earlier, um, um, syntax errors highlighting. So for example, if you go to tools options, we have a new options here called show syntax errors. Okay. By default, it's going to be turned on. So for example, if you say here test result, okay, one, you can see it now in red because it doesn't recognize that. So that's kind of pretty good. I've been working with it for 2 or 3 weeks by now. And, writing some new code, it's kind of nice because by the time you're able to run, most of the syntax error or the errors are already cleaned up because when you type and you see that, you automatically going to fix that and by the time you're running it or testing it, you won't have any issues. uh, Another thing that we've done, when you build or compile, it will show more than one compiler error in the build log. So you can go and fix all those errors instead of just one as we had in the last version. So all of these improvement were basically um, done to create better and faster coding and more consistent coding, because we do know, everyone has a little bit different style, and we've been kind of promoting consistent coding for a while. If you remember, like in the prior version, we added like those prefix for variables like s and I and so on. So we are pretty, very adamant about this consistent coding. And okay, so any question about this feature? I can
Yeah, I was
also, yeah,
curious if you're planning on adding any ability to like customize the style details of like spacing, and I know you have options for turning things on and off.
yeah, we do
But
have options for spacing. For example, if you prefer to write something like this, test result space equal 1.3 instead of no spaces, you can actually change the option, and there is an option to do that. We don't have options for everything. Like, for example, we kind of made a decision that if someone writes the if statement in uppercase, it's not consistent. So as soon as you move to the next line, it's going to go and bring it back to what we think it's consistent. So there is a option for that if you want to turn it off, but we didn't kind of add an option if you want it uppercase or lowercase. It just the default is lowercase if you want to use the consistency that we offer. So not everything is customizable, but you can
okay,
certainly disable that if you don't want to have it.
I got you. Now, does that store when you save the file? Does it save it with the spaces and changes, or does it adjust that when you open the file?
It will basically store it in the file. So if you go to another machine that doesn't have that option, turned on, obviously you'll see whatever was saved. So,
Okay.
and you won't make any changes to your machine. Um, so
All right.
yeah, you
Thank
can
you.
see other things. I can show you a few other options here. For example, we have something like test exec. Okay, so for example, this program doesn't have test exec, but I can say, okay, so let's say ATML, and then you can see if I put get and then enable and so on. So yeah, you can see still that this is still in process. We're still working on, but as soon as you write the statement, let me close that. Yeah, I'll open it again. As soon as you open you type a command that is invalid, you can see at the same time what's going on. If you have syntax error or not. So it's also applied to commands, to functions. For example, if you say val, okay, and you can see that the function is uppercase V and lowercase al. So as soon as you type, you move next line, uh, it should fix the case to the original format. Um, yeah, so again, we're not completely done here uh, with the this version, but you can see, for example, if I let's see if I write test result equal 3.4, you can see that it changed the cases of the test result. I wrote it all in lowercase. It turned it on back to the actual variable. So that will also keep, make your variables use or procedure naming the same way as you defined it. Another feature that you can see in the code editor is see what happens when I click on test result. All the instances of that variables are highlighted, as you can see. I'm clicking here on this variable. You can see all the instances of that variable. The places where I use that variable in the same view are highlighted. So this is really, I think, a very important feature also, because sometimes you write a very complex procedure and you want to see where it's been used without doing a search. So just by clicking on it on a word, you can see that it highlights instances of that. Another feature like that, for example, if I open this program here, and let me just turn off the one of the option because I know it's problematic at this point. Uh, I'll turn it off, and we go back, and you can see if I click on the if statement, you can see that it highlights all the places where all the different keywords that relate to that statement. Okay, the same with loop. So if I'm doing a loop here, you can see it highlights the loop, the end loop, and also the exit loop, which means it tells you exactly, all the important things that relate to that loop. So I think that's also going to be, a very nice feature when you write code, especially nested loops or ifs and so on. You can see exactly um, what's going on. You can see also like things like, I don't know if I have here like a select case statement here, like something like that. You can see how that looks now. So again, everything is done here to improve coding and makes coding consistent and easier. Any more question about this? Okay. There are a few other feature here that were added. So for example, if I do if and I do control enter, you can see that it creates a template for the if statement. The same with select or loop and so on. I hit Control Enter, you can see that it creates the statement. Um, Same with the, I think, select. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is the code editor improvement. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so other improvements that we have done. So I mentioned this multiple compiler errors. So when you compile, you'll see multiple links and you can click on each one of them and fix them. This is a new feature that people ask a lot, a way to reorder a procedure or variables or so if, for example, if I go here and if this was not sorted, I can right click and there is a new statement here, reorder alphabetically. Okay, so this will sort all the procedure. You can do that also for variables or types. So when you save it and you come back, it will have the all the procedures sorted or variables or types and so on. Okay.
Does that reorder alphabetically command also work on drivers in system?
No, we didn't put that in here. Like drivers, because it doesn't really make sense. Drivers, they usually have their order has some significant. So if you want to just to reorder, you just drag and drop them manually. But the procedure have no, there's no importance to the order unless you organize them by certain, topic or some it makes sense to you. But yeah, drivers are not, you cannot, there's no reorder for driver. Okay. Other things that we have done, this is another feature that you can see here, user folders at any level. So the idea here is to create something like this, you can see, and you can rename it, obviously. Like, for example, this could be a documentation folder. And then below that, you can put all the documents that you wanted to have, like, I don't know, like a user guide or something like this. So, for example, if you have the BBTP, you can create documentation and put links for all the manuals of the BBTP project. And let's try to do one like this. So I'm just going to go and select like a document that I have. So for example, let's select a manual here. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to put um, a manual like this one, okay? So you can see that I have the manual, the PDF here. And if I right click on it, you can, let's see where it is, or I can just double click on it. You can see that it opens the PDF viewer, the Acrobat, and you can actually do that. If it was a Word file, it would open Microsoft Word and so on. So there's supposed to be a custom menu for that, and right now since we changed all the menus, it doesn't show. But there will be another specific menu to PDF where you can print it or open it and so on. I believe this is what you see when you go here, like to compare. Yeah, it should have something like open and so on. And so that's a new feature of ATEasy, and I think it's kind of nice because you can put all your, not just the ATEasy file, you can put folders to hold like design documents or any other files that you want to have. Maybe external Visual Studio project or something like that. So you can open them directly from your workspace in ATEasy. Any question about this? Okay. Other things that we have done is this is a new command, go to implementation. So just to see how that works. So for example, if you have a command, let's say I'm opening this test exec and I go to commands, or I go to a procedure. Um, let's see, what would be a good example? Yeah, we could do it from here. Okay. So let's say I have a command here. Uh, let's just try to do that. Test exec. And I don't know, log append, and we're just gonna go and say ABC right to it. Okay. So this is a command. It could be like a you can always come right click on the append and you can see we have go to definition of append. That usually goes to the command itself. Okay. But if I go to here, where I was, yeah, I go to right click and say go to implementation, it will open the procedure directly. So instead of going twice, going to the command, then from the command, right clicking and going to the implementation of that, you can go directly in one click. So this is a new command that we added. Question about this? Okay, so another
I want to say
feature.
thank you because you'll save us all a lot of time with that one. I think I suggested that one a while back.
Yes, I think yeah, I don't recall who exactly suggested, but yeah, I mean it's probably you guys. Okay, so new another option is check project before run. So that option, when you click here, I think it's in the workspace. No, it's here. Oh, here. So check project before run. You can see it's the third option from the top. Basically, the way ATEasy works, when you hit the start button, it does compile only the things that he knows you for sure gonna run, which means at that point, it will be just the events and all the drivers, on init or all the events like on init, on init test, and so on. So all of these are compiled, but none of the and all the things that are called from those events. But as far as programs, we're not compiling any program at that point unless you call the run statement to run a program. At that point, that program will be compiled. And that's only when you run from the development environment. Of course, you can go and call a build and do execute to execute the executable. But if you're running from the development environment, we have just-in-time compiler that just compiles just the essential things that we know for sure you're going to run. So sometimes people want to actually make sure before they run that all their programs and all the project is fully compilable. So you can check that option if you like to work that way. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer to start running, but on the other hand, you kind of know that when the program start running, there won't be any compiler errors. So this is a new option that we added. Okay, another feature is and that one I cannot demonstrate, but it's a data visualizer for call stack and watch window. Um, this is especially important when you have a large amount of data stored in a variable that you're watching in the watch window. or in the call stack. So for example, it could be a string that has like maybe a file that you read and you want to see it in a natural way. Or could be an XML data that you read from something and you want to see it indented and displayed properly, or a large array. So we have now what we call a data visualizer. So basically, when you view the variables, there is a little arrow and you can click on it and it opens a window, and that windows will show the data in more you know easier to understand, especially if when you have large string. Right now it was very limited, it would show in only the first I don't know, 200 bytes or something like this. This will allow you to see the whole string in one um, window. So this is a new feature we added as well. Other features, compare folder is swap. I don't know how much you're using the compare folder. We're using it internally here in Marvin quite a bit. You know, people are modifying code and we are using it to, you know, this compare folders that you see here open. We're using it quite heavily to merge folders or sources. So for example, you can see that, so we added this button here, the swap button. So this folder on the right is going to be swapped with the left. So it's a minor feature, but it's very useful. And the merging tool is just the same as before. You can see it works just the same. And you can see right and left and so on. So okay, other feature, the monitor window was revamped quite a bit. Um, let's see if I can show you. Let's see, I can go and say, okay, I could open one of the example. Let's see. Um, okay, so opening that actually was here. And I can go ahead and open the monitor window. So let me size it. I'll close this one. Okay, so you can see we added a few things here, like source, and we also added driver shortcut. So driver shortcut is actually tells you what's the driver that was used to send or receive that you know, the data. Um, Another feature here, you can see if I right click, there is a way to filter if you click the filter window. So this was the interfaces were there before, but now you can also select drivers. So you can filter by drivers. So if you just want to filter that DMM driver or some just communication from that instrument, you can just check that one. And also another feature is just by address, where you can type here the address of the instrument. So that kind of filter it better than before. Other feature that we added here is a way to, so for example, if I run this one, let's see, I'm going to say start logging and I'm going to hit the start button. Okay, it should show the data and you can see the data. So you can see the driver shortcut that was used is this one, IO table. Okay, and you can also right click here and they say save as, and basically it's create a CSV file, and let's say ABC, and I'll save it on my desktop. And okay, so this was saved on my desktop. Let's see if it's here. And you can see that ABC, I can double click on it and actually see the data. here. I can also read it back uh, by right click and just open file and open it back. So this is an improvement to the monitor window. Any question about this? Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So other improvement, we added a way to activate licenses online. Obviously, that's only applicable if you are connected to the internet. And so there is a way to activate that. Uh, we also added a way to install, we kind of support VMs and installation of network servers when it's connected online. Um, I think for some companies we do exceptions so they can install their license on the VM even if they're not connected to the internet. Um, the help menu was revamped a little bit more, and we added links to our web page and support area. If you need support, you can click on that. It will basically open your Magic account and you can create new incident or update information inside your incident. Other things that you can see is the user forms web page. So you can open that and then also check for update. This is a new feature that you will see, and you can check if there is a new build. That actually, when you open ATEasy, if you go here to the tools, you can actually set an option, notify version update on start. So if that is on, you will see a little red light, a red flag in the status bar of ATEasy that shows you that if you move the mouse on top of it, it will tell you that you have a new update, and you can click on it and install or download the new version. Okay. Um, Other features. Okay, so the next thing is kind of more about runtime. So we have in this new version, there are two IDEs, one for 32-bit applications and one for 64-bit application. You can see that when you look at it at my desktop here on the left, you can see there are two icons, ATEasy 2021 x64 and ATEasy 2021 x86. So the one I'm using right now is, I can right click, you can see it says x86 is the 32-bit version. I can also open the 64-bit version. It looks exactly the same. You can see it just says x64 in the, and okay. So the 64-bit version looks exactly the same. The only difference you'll see when you go to about, you'll see it's 64-bit. So how that works? So when you install ATEasy, it basically gonna install two versions of the IDE, 64 and 32-bit. And I will go later on, I'll show you how that, where it's installed it and how, but basically you're gonna have two shortcuts on your desktop and you can use either one. This 32-bit version of the IDE generate 32-bit application, and the 64-bit generates 64-bit DLLs or executable. So basically, it's really depends on what you're using. We have one setup to install both IDEs. So there is no actually selection. You just install both of them. You know, for simplicity, we basically just install them. You can have in the same machine 64 and 32, and and also you can have the older versions of ATEasy version 10 or 9 and so on at the same time installed. Um, The main feature, it kind of took us a little bit time to kind of have the same source file for both 64 and 86. So I don't have to really have different program or drivers for 64-bit or 32-bit. It's all going to be, it's all working with no changes. You don't really have to make any changes to your drivers, unless you actually want to force a certain external components that you're using. Like, for example, if you want to use a 64-bit DLL from 32-bit executable, you can actually do it, but you have to tell ATEasy that this is what you want to do. And normally, the 32-bit version will use the 32-bit DLLs, and the 64-bit will use the 64-bit DLL. If that DLL does not exist, it will use the 32-bit. And we kind of made it so 64-bit executable can use 32-bit DLLs or .NET or ActiveX, and vice versa. The 32-bit uh, uh, executable can use 64-bit DLL. It's a little bit confusing, but the main idea was that we tried to make it seamless. So you don't have to really, um, if you decided to use the 64-bit environment IDE and create 64-bit executable, you don't really have to have all your components ready for 64-bit or compiled for 64. You can have a few of them, like one or two, that are 32-bit and still be able to benefit from the 64-bit memory space, larger memory space, and so on. So, so how do we do that? It's kind of, we use a proxy. If you kind of use that 64-bit, 32-bit mixing, but if you don't use that mixing, then everything is in process, and there's no it's not more complex than any other application that you're familiar. Uh, so because of that, we can use a shared driver folder. So our drivers folders is going to be just one folder. We don't have to have duplicate or different drivers folder for 64 or 32-bit. And so, and basically we have one program system and driver, both support 64-bit and 32. There is a new data type called a pointer that is used just for the cases where you want to have, for example, let's say you using a Windows API, and the Windows API obviously is different handles for 32-bit application than 64-bit application. You can use the A pointer so it will be different for each, depends on the way you compile or you run your application on the 64-bit. If you compile it to 64-bit application, then it's going to use the A pointer is going to be 64-bit data type. If you did it on the 32-bit executable, it will be 32-bit. And so that's it's kind of, I don't think many companies have this. I mean, Visual Studio, if you want to do something like this, very complex to create a proxy and call 64-bit from 32 or vice versa. It's kind of complex. So we made it so the migration for you, it'll be much easier when you move from 32-bit application to 64. Okay, so I mentioned this, the mixed external components, which means that you can have 64-bit or 32-bit at the same time. And basically the whole idea was that allow you to migrate to 64-bit, even if not all the components are 64-bit. Any question about this? Okay, so let me show you a little bit how the setup works so you can see how it's going to look like when you install the ATEasy 2021. So
Hey, Ronnie,
basically,
sorry to
yes,
interrupt. Do you have, maybe you're gonna go show this, but do you have any examples of like the mixture of different um, bitness in one project and how that's defined? If you need to specify, like,
yes.
are there any extra flags or properties that you
Yeah,
need to set?
so yeah, so if you go here, like for example, I open this as the language, okay? And then I'm looking at libraries, okay? And I'm clicking right click and viewing the properties. So as you can see, this version that I'm using right now is 64-bit, okay? So you can see that what it did, it actually I can select here. I just left it as before. I didn't touch anything. So because it knows that I'm in 64-bit, it's going to pick up the one from the system 32. At the same time, if I open the 32-bit IDE and open the same program, the language, okay, and click here and go to user and right click and open the properties, you can see now that this is use a different DLL. It uses the one from the syswow, which is the 32-bit equivalent, okay? So this is how seamless it is. You can see that basically it's the same program using the same library, but you can see each flavor, if I'm using the 64-bit ATEasy, it knows how to pick the right one. If I wanted to differentiate between them and force it to use a specific version, I can go here and click 64-bit and actually force it and type here a different DLL then or the full path of that DLL to force it to use that DLL. Okay?
Okay, yeah, I think that makes
I
sense.
hope
So
it's
like
not
if,
overwhelming, but it's kind of like we
no, I
made it
think that makes it
so
a lot easier to implement, so you don't have to fully, because that's one of the concerns I had, is that we'd have to go to 64-bit, we'd have to get a 64-bit version of every library that we're using.
right.
But this makes it so we can do it in pieces slowly.
Yeah, and by default, you know, when you use the 64-bit, it's going to go and look for the system 32 and not the syswow. But if you won't find it in system 32, it will go to syswow and pick up the one you have. And okay, and you can always go back here and force it or see what actually is being used by looking here. Okay, so okay, so this is uh, about this. And moving back to the setup, and let me show you how that look like when you look at the drive. So, you know, in Windows 64-bit Windows, you have program files and you have program files x86. The x86 was designed by Windows to for 32-bit processes, while this one for 64-bit processes. So basically, we kind of follow the same idea. So when you install ATEasy on a 64-bit machine, okay, ATEasy was now moved to comply with my Windows requirements, and basically you have to have the company name, and then below that ATEasy, and then below that 2021. And if we have a new version 2022, it's going to have a different folder under ATEasy. And then you can see here driver example and so on. And then this is the 32-bit version because I'm under program file 86. And then if I go here to the 64-bit version, you can see we have the same thing, Marvin test, ATEasy, and then 2021. And we have, since we have the shared drivers folders and example and so on, so these are basically shortcuts to the other folder under x86. Okay, so this is how it looks on a 64-bit Windows. On a 32-bit Windows, all you're going to see is just program files and then Marvin Test, ATEasy, and 1021. The 64-bit version of ATEasy will not be installed there, obviously. So this is how it looks, and obviously we adjusted the options of for drivers to point to the right location for each of the versions. And so so this kind of explained this, the 64-bit and the 32, and we're not asking for installation folder. Basically, in the prior version, we used to ask where you want to install ATEasy. At this point, we're not doing that anymore. This is based on what Microsoft recommendation on the Windows. Basically, it's all installed in the same folder on the program files, and then Marvin Test, and then ATEasy. So there's no option to set it, and no target directory in the command line options for the setup. And and then kind of explain about symbolic links for which is like shortcuts for example drivers, so we can share the same drivers. um, and yeah, I mean, each one of those versions you can have different options. If you still want to have different options for examples or drivers, you can do that by setting the options differently on each of the versions. They're not shared. um, okay. So this is about the setup. Any question about the setup and the folders? Okay, one more thing before, so you can see also, if I go here to the startup group in the menu, that's also changed. So uh, uh, unfortunately, Windows does not have a cascading start menu. So what we did at this point, instead of putting all the Marvin tests at the same folder, at this point, you can see there is a whole new group, and all the things that relate to ATEasy 2021 is in the same folder, unlike before where everything was in one folder. Um, and of course, this version is at least the coding is 100% backwards compatible. So whatever code you had before, it should be able to run as is with no changes. Other features that I'm going to quickly go over, it's a few functions in the language, programming language. So we have pause function that was changed. We added a few optional parameters. We never changed the actual prototype, so it's always backwards compatible. But you can do compare no case or reverse find in the pause function. That was highly desirable missing feature. Um, form on move, there's a new event. There is a new enum const, which is a function in the internal library that returns, um, uh, it returns the enumerated constant, either name or description or value. And that's usually used a lot when you want to create like a user interface with a drop list, and you don't want to type it in the actual drop list, the combo box. You just want to do it using code. So if you have the enum name, you pass in the enum name, and you can basically pass the value or the index, and it will just return the name or description and so on. The pointer data type, we explained that before. And we also have if not def, that's an else if we added to the language. As what we're seeing, it's similar to what you see in C or C++. Okay, the next slide, we have, I believe, two more slides. The next slide is covering the cybersecurity improvement that were a result of some customer requests when they bidding a project to the DoD. So we added the compliance with the DoD application and security and development STIG. STIG is like requirements or that the government puts up when they put a new contract, and companies bid on it. So we kind of comply to this version 5 release 1, which is the latest. There are about 300 requirements to that STIG. And basically, many of those requirements you cannot bid if you don't meet them. So we had a few projects here that, and our customer also that had this, and so we kind of comply. I can show you a few of those. For example, audit logs. Whenever you start the program or end the program or start ATEasy, they want a record of it. Or if a user log into ATEasy, they want to record it. Or for user modify, like you create a new user or modify existing user, it kind of log everything in the Windows event log. If I go here to event viewer, and you can see if I click here on applications, and there is a new one called ATEasy, and you can see here it records basically everything you do. You can see what ATEasy started or ended, who is the user, and what project was run, and what's the UT, and so on. So if you browse here, there's all kinds of events, and this was part of the um, requirements that they have. So this is supported both in test executive and also development environment level. Moving on to the last slide. Any question about this cybersecurity features? Okay, moving on to the last slide. Some of the improvement we have done in the test executive. So we reduce overhead about 10 times, especially this is visible for long logs. This was done, I believe, also for you guys and also for other projects that we have with other customers. So they have, programs that has a few thousands of tests, and they don't want to see overhead because of test logs. And this is basically we fix that or improve that quite a bit. The cybersecurity was integrated to the test executive, and we have a few new options. Like if you want to repeat run, you can specify how many times you want to repeat, and you can also put delays between runs. In the new ATEasy, you will see also Python driver. This driver allow you to execute Python code directly from ATEasy, either executing Python files or just typing the Python code within ATEasy. And another feature that we add is a STDF driver. So this is used a lot in semiconductor. It's standard test data format. It has a way to, put the binning and all the semiconductor stuff, specific records for testing and saving semiconductor test results. We also had some improvement with HTML, but those you already have. So I guess that's it as far as my presentation. Any questions
Could you maybe just show the Python driver, an example of that?
that we provide? Yes. Okay, so let's see. I think actually I have it open here. I'll open the example itself. Are you guys using Python?
Not on the BBTPs, but
Okay.
some other projects. Yeah, just curious how that actually is
Okay,
implemented.
so this is the example we provide. Basically, it uses a driver. Let's look at it here. Let's turn it on as the active project, and I'll open the system, and you can see there is a new driver called Python. If I open it, the driver is basically using the embedded Python DLL that comes with any Python installation that you have. And you can see this one is using Python 3.8, okay, which is almost the latest. I think the latest one is 3.9 something. But you can change it and use the latest one. It's always what we saw. It's backwards compatible. So the driver has commands that let you execute Python code. You can execute them directly, like you can see here, like run, and you can put here Python code. You know, it could be a string that holds a whole script for Python. Okay, and and then there is also a way to pass in parameters and get back results from the and we show here the example actually comes with a Python. I think if you go here, yes, the you can see there is a Python file that we provide as the example, and we execute. That file has classes and let's see if I can open it. I think uh, let's see, open containing folder. And if I'll edit it, okay, so this is the code, the Python code. We have a class and we have methods, init and write, and some standalone functions and all kinds of code. And we kind of demonstrate how to call that from within this example here. So you can see the next one here. This is the one that actually uses that. So import the Python. This is importing the Python, this file basically. And then you get a handle back. And then what do you do with this handle? You can call a class like Python class, which is here. Uh, and you can see Python class. And then you can call, you can pass argument. You can set like a variable and pass it in and call an object and so on. So you can browse through that and see all the different cases, what we do. Um, we have a few customer, actually in autonomous vehicle, Intel, a company called Mobileye that they acquired, and they're using it heavily because a lot of the code that they have was written in Python, and they use ATEasy as basically test executive plus new code development, but all the Python code they're calling it using this driver. Okay, is that answers?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's very cool. That's opens up new opportunities to possibly share code from other projects or use external libraries.
Yeah, we've been always, you know, trying to open the environment to other technologies. You know, so Python was one of them, but you know, .NET, DLLs, ActiveX, all of these are external components, LabVIEW, and so on. All of these external components. So if you have a need for something that we don't have, just let us know, and we'll see if it makes sense to add it. Um, any other questions?
Is there a timeline for the release? I mean, is there a solid date? I know you
So
said it
we
was
are
shortly.
hoping to, you know, we have limited resources, but we're hoping to release a review at the end of this month, and another and the final version the month after that. This is our goal. You know, I'm hopeful that we can meet that. We have a few customers that already using this pre-release version. But we before we put it out, we want to, you know, test a little bit more and have it. We will have it link in our website to download the preview version, and I will let Ben and the group know if you want to experiment with that when it's available and so on. Okay. Any other
All right,
questions?
that's all the questions for me.
Okay, so I thank you for joining and listening to this presentation. Hopefully you like what you saw. And that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.